Okay, this is being recorded on the Samsung tablet and the external camera Microsoft LifeCam, and I believe the Microsoft LifeCam's microphone. What I wanted to do was, first of all, show some debris here. This is leftovers from the prints, which makes some pretty interesting piles of rubbish or debris that could be in a battlefield or something facility, or maybe it's a destroyed mech or something. In the foreground here, we have introduced a new element, and that is the aerospace fighter, which we obtained off of Thingiverse, and I forget the author's, the creator's name, but it seems to be like a pretty good little aerospace fighter. There's wings, of course, and some conventional engines and so on, but we made this quick little flight stand out of just a block, and we super hot glued it to a disc to give it some stability, and that is, and by the way, it's not glued on, it's just press fit, so the hole that's in there is actually a pretty good hole, both top and bottom, and the craft is just sitting on it. So, but here is the other issue, right? When an aircraft comes in, first of all, it's going to fly in this space very quickly. As a matter of fact, it's going to fly, well, first of all, it's going to fly at an attack speed, which is not, the top speed of the craft, obviously, because that would be too fast for targeting, I suppose. And so it would probably move like 9 or 10 spaces, almost clearly right across the game table. But if you were to consider how you would maneuver or place an aerospace fighter into this kind of combat, you could say, well, its attack speed is 10, and from its current location, what's the trajectory? What kind of a flight path would it be able to negotiate? Clearly, you wouldn't be able to do the turns that we have seen land-based objects do. It would need to have a stipulation that you need a minimum forward distance before you can change a facing at that point you reach. So if you were to say at X speed, you can make one facing change for a normal turn, 2 facing changes for an extremely tight turn, but that's something we yet to actually portray. But let's look at it this way: if we were to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, our ship would end up way up here, like that. And if you said, okay, at that point you can now face, make one facing change. So that's how it would work. And this is probably, a precursor to all different kinds of aerial vehicle gaming. There are obviously some things we would have to borrow from or inject from Hex Command Raptors. The certain degree of research would be needed in order to see how viable or realistic it can be, or not, but just how playable it would be. If you were to say that the ship would move in that fashion and then make a facing change, I suppose it's possible you could just as well say, well, what if it moves slower? Well, if you move slower, could you make that facing change sooner? Well, say you were to move only 5 hexes in a move, and then make a facing change. That would probably have to be legislated that, sure, you can do that, but then your next move also has to be at that speed, or perhaps 1 hex faster, because in order to simulate, excuse me, in order to simulate a tight turn, you could say, just as we have in Hex Command Starships, you make a certain degree of forward movement, and then you make a facing change and continue, and then make a facing change and continue. That's a maneuver, and there are certain regulations as to how you do that. So I just wanted to show this video that we don't often get a chance to put in some aircraft. Oh, and by the way, there are other ones I printed from that same author. I'm just calling these Corsairs because they have the bent up, wing. They look like phantom bodies with a Corsair type of, well, actually, you know what? They look like phantoms, don't they? F4 Phantoms. Here's another version of that same ship, and I've decked them out with some rockets. Is this the guy? No, that's not the guy. It's just another ship. Oh, here it is, right here. So this guy, I've decked him out with some missiles and rockets. So a little bit more lethal. At any rate, yeah, we'll put them on their bases and we'll try and introduce them to the game. So it might be interesting. Well, basically, what is it? Is it flying artillery? Kind of. And how do you shoot at something like that? Well, that's again a discussion for another day. You could easily just come up with something and say, okay, because of all these energy weapons out here, you can certainly target, but in order to create damage, well, let's put it this way. When we have energy weapons firing on mechs, they cause damage right away, right? You don't need to hold the beam on the target for it to have an effect. It seems to have an effect immediately. I think that's just the way of cutting to the chase. Any kind of beam weapon should technically have to be held in place in order for it to have an effect, but in this universe, and even in Star Wars or other things, they fire their beams, and the beams they cause an effect. They cause something to happen immediately. You don't have to hold it on the target. But does that apply to aircraft? Well, if we say yes, same thing for aircraft, then what chance do aircraft have against all these ground-based energy weapons? Perhaps they have shielding? I don't know. But then that begs the question, why doesn't a mech have shielding? Well, we don't know. It's never really been discussed. We have talked about shields on mechs, but that's just another way of saying armor enforced by armor. So, yeah, there's some things to be talked about, and yeah, we'll get to them in due course.